Hello. I want to do a very quick overview of Module 4 for you in EDSC 591. So we're going to scroll down to Module 4. By now you should be familiar with our course site. And here we have Module 4. Module 4 is dedicated to core Proposition 1. Teachers are committed to students and their learning. Your signature assignment will be a student case study, which we'll take a look at in just a minute. And in this module, we explore motivation in student learning. We examine the criticality of the teacher-student relationship. We recognize cultural influence on student learning, and we discuss the importance of student voice. I happen to be a student voice researcher, so this is a subject near and dear to my heart. And you don't need to see me talking. That's distracting. I'm going to pull that down for the rest of this overview. So we start off in week 8, the first week of the module. This again is a 3-week module. And we will start with some online class discussions on Tuesday and Wednesday in the first week. So that's the 15th to the 16th at 5 o'clock. As you know, these are optional. They're just quick. I try and keep them to a half hour. I just want to, in case anyone has any questions about the student case study that's due at the end of this module, or about any of the activities in the module, you have a chance to ask them, and I go through them briefly, sort of like the version 2 of this walkthrough. So that will go on Tuesday and Wednesday, if anyone shows up. For the quick examination of Module 4. And then Module 4 starts with a VoiceThread introduction to motivation. And this is where we just have a little fun. I ask you to watch a 1.5-minute video and then place a comment on the video, answering the question, or why do you think I chose to start a conversation about motivation with this video? This is meant to be fun and light, and just get your juices running and thinking about motivation. And yes, it's not that easy to find a video where 2 people don't have cell phones, but I still think that it makes a point that's worth watching. After that, brief comment on that VoiceThread. Then you have a discussion forum where I ask you to go through a video in which Daniel Pink, it's about 10 minutes long, actually summarizes the findings that he authored, or he wrote about in his book Drive. And it's actually based mostly on self-determination theory. And so I've given you a quick research summary on self-determination theory and its relation to education and students that I'd like you to read. And then start a discussion thread and sort of think about both what the video is talking about and what the research review on self-determination theory talks about. And synthesize both of them. And what are the key points that are being made in these 2 ways of talking about motivation? And then watch this TED Talk by Angela Lee Duckworth about grit, and respond to 2 classmates in the forum, sort of dealing with what they said and trying to integrate what Duckworth says about grit, and seeing if there's a way that you can synthesize both their comments and something you learned in the last video. So the initial post is due on self-determination theory and Pink's Drive on Friday, October 18th, and then on Sunday, your responses are due. And that's the first week. In the second week, I have you watch, this is an older video, but it is, I think, still very, very moving. So it's about 10 minutes long, and I have you watch this video, this short film on immersion, and then put your initial response to it what did you notice about the interactions between Moses and his classmates and his teacher, and put that response on by Friday, October 25th, because no responses are due on that one, because really you're going to take that, your watching of that video and your initial response and add to it in another forum. I ask you to read Stage Environment Fit Theory and Preparing for Cultural Responsive Teaching. And then once you've taken those two readings, in what ways does stage fit influencing the classroom environment, student behavior, and student learning? In what ways does culturally relevant pedagogy or lack of it influence classroom environment, student behavior, and student learning? But I want you to answer those questions in response to your initial interpretation of the observations you saw in the film Emerging. And then cite the texts where possible. This is where I'd like to see you use citations from either of the two articles or other things we've read this as appropriate. And then also those initial responses are due by Friday. And then I'd like you to respond to two students, two of your peers, by Sunday. And then finally, the last week, we only have one forum, and I want you to use your voice. So I want this to be an audio. You notice that this has an underlying theme, this whole module, 3 weeks, about student voice. So I want you to use your student voice. And so I have you read The View from the Lighthouse by Haycock, and then Students as Expert Witnesses of Teaching and Learning by Busher. And this is where we get into student voice. And then I want you to summarize your takeaways from those readings, but I want you to do it using your voice. And I've given different ways you can do it. You can, talk into your phone and upload the file. You can provide a VoiceSpread link to your post. You can record another talking head video if you would like. So it can be an audio file, it can be a talking head video, it can be a PowerPoint slide where you just voice over it, or a Word doc. You can do it any way you want, but what the importance here is I want to hear your voice. And in that last week, the initial post is due on Friday, November 1, and then by Sunday, I want you to have responded to a couple of, and the responses can be written, they don't have to be voiced, responds to a couple of your classmates by that Sunday. Also that Sunday, the signature assignment is due. And this is probably the most, what students often tell me becomes the most important assignment in this course to them. It has the most influence on their learning, and it provides the biggest takeaways for them. So what you're going to try and do is find a middle or high school student who differs from you in at least, and they can be one of your students, and I'm very flexible on how you make this happen because I know different school environments are radically different. But I want your student to differ from you in at least 2 of the following areas: ethnically, culturally, linguistically, or academically. And those are pretty broad definitions, but I want this to be someone who's different than you. So if you were a high overachiever in school, always knocking down the A's, I don't want this to be an A student. I want this to be someone different than you. Then you make arrangements to both observe this student in his or her classroom, in a classroom setting for, I'd recommend at least 2 hours if you can get it. If you can only get an hour, that's fine. And obtain the lesson plan from, if you're watching another teacher teach this student, obtain the lesson plan from that teacher for that hour or 2. If you're not currently teaching, and you need help, we can go out to the class, but I think all of you are currently teaching, so I don't think this should be a big deal. But if you need help, linking up or making it happen, let's put it out in the announcements to the class. I normally can find a teacher who will make us one of their students available if someone has hurdles that they can't jump over. And this can be one of your students. it'd be ideal if it is one of your students in your class, if the lesson to be taught can be taught by somebody else. If you have a student teacher, if you have a friend who has a prep period, that period, have them teach the lesson for your class that day. Because what you want to be able to do is spend most of your time observing this student and the interactions and what's working and what isn't working in this particular lesson. I want you to spend time with them, and I want you to interview that student. Some people like to interview the student first, then watch. Some people like to watch, then interview. And then with everything you've learned from your readings, in what ways is the learning environment supported according to motivation research? So after you've seen the learning environment for this student, and you've talked to this student, and you've asked them what motivates them and what they think about school, and and in what ways was the instruction observed culturally relevant? In what ways is it not? And I urge you to ask your students questions like, what do you like? What don't you like? Really dig into what's working for this student and what's not working for this student. What surprised you in the readings? Did you change your ideas about equity and fairness in response to meeting students' diverse educational needs? If so, how? And did you read anything that further reinforced your ideas about these issues? If so, how? And you can extend those questions or go off. Those are plant or seed questions. But this is a write-up about this student. But I want you sort of discussing the larger issues in sort of context of what happened, what you observed, what you learned from this student. And that's the student case study. And that wraps up. And then finally, I want you to use your student voice as I asked you to do at the end of each module and keep this course going and informed. I've made several changes to this course based on comments you've already put into these feedback modules. So they're really, really helpful to me. And that wraps up Module 4. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoy it. And I'll see you online.